Welcome back to Candid Football Conversations, our Wednesday live tonight. And we've got a very, very special panel today to talk about a topic which is very, very dear to my heart. And I was talking about it, a couple of days back with Rahul, who again joins me and will be co-hosting tonight, about the topic of players of Indian origin, overseas citizen of India. The All India Football Federation has created a task force. And at the moment, it looks like we are closer than ever before to potentially see overseas citizens of India, especially from Europe and North America, potentially playing for the Indian national team. We've had players in the past. Izumi Arata, of course, comes to mind, or Arata Izumi, who is now the assistant coach of Inter Kashi, who, of course, is half Japanese, half Indian. And he let go of his Japanese passport to take up an Indian passport, was a regular in the I-League and the ISL, but it took him 5 years to really get that citizenship. So the question now is, how long will it take? Will it be needed to get an Indian passport as it is at the moment? Or will there be other mechanisms? And for this, I've put together a very, very nice special panel today with dear friends of mine, some of them who've been speaking about this for ages about this. To start with Parus Nischal, who's joining us from the US, from the Nischal Sports Group in Pittsburgh, Parus, or?
Pittsburgh at the moment, yeah.
Yeah, you're in Pittsburgh, but also UK born. So that's a very interesting angle. We'll talk about North America, but the UK as well. And my two brothers from the UK, Zoeb Rashid on one side and Mohammed Shanawaz. Gentlemen, very, very warm good evening.
Evening, everybody.
Evening. And it's good to see that Shanawaz is sitting somewhere in his car and the sun is shining. So yes,
which is a rarity.
In this summer, it has been a rarity. But let's talk about this. And Rahul and I, of course, were speaking about this a few days back, online and offline, about this topic. The others, of course, we have been speaking about this for a long, long time. If I can get your first reactions when you read about the AIFF creating a task force, what was your reaction to the topic? Shanawaz, you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, for me, that was as South Asian as it gets. Let's create a task force. I mean, it's a straightforward thing. Everybody's got enough data. Everybody knows. Everybody, you've been harping on about for over 2 decades. Everybody's been asking about it, demanding it. Of course, the challenges are there. But I think, it sort of felt like the federation finally sort of maybe giving in to the demands of the fans and the coaches and saying, okay, let's look at it, how we can go about it if we have enough quality at our disposal. Because, of course, in terms of like India's recruitment, Pakistan's recruitment, or Bangladesh recruitment, it'll differ a great deal just because in terms of quality you have at home. So I think it was an interesting move, but in terms of the sort of the legal political aspects of it, are we closer than maybe 15 years ago? I'm not sure. But then again, the government probably has a greater deal of interest in the sport now than it did before. So it's one to keep an eye out for, I think, in terms of South Asian and Asian context as well, because it will propel the Indian men's and women's team rapidly towards, I guess, continental and world tournaments, if that happens. Because in terms of the quality is there, you've got the individuals playing at very good level, and some good players in the academies, and how you can then sort of blend it together with the talent at home. Again, the whole point has to be that you want to play the best 11, irrespective of where they're playing. So yeah, because you might have 11 players playing abroad better than your local ones, and then you let it be a right dilemma.
Exactly. Let's come to that topic a little later, because that's another topic altogether. Do you start with 2, 4, 6, 20? I don't know.
I don't think that there shouldn't be any unofficial quota or anything like that. But yeah, whoever's willing to take up the documentation and who's able to get it, and then I guess then it's up to the coaching staff, isn't it?
Exactly. We'll come to that a little later. Paros, your first reaction when I shared that info with you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was you texted me, and then I got a Google alert. I got about 3-4 different things. I think similar to Shanawa's, I think it's about time that there's been more official interest on this, since we've been all talking. Obviously, you yourself talking about this for donkey's years now. I mean, yeah, I mean, for somebody when my generation growing up, a lot of us who are getting trials or jumping around the system in the UK, all of us, my generation wanted to play for India if we could, and then obviously knowing we couldn't was quite difficult to take. So it'll be nice for those players, men and women, who want to represent their home countries, their countries or their roots, and give them. And again, if they're going to follow through with what they're going to do, which is research the problem, where I guess us five plus I'm sure a bunch of others who have the knowledge in the game, they don't have to look too far for that information, where the players are playing, what areas of the world. And I think, not to skip to the next sort of topic, but I think also the coaching as well has to be evaluated heavily as well going into it. So I mean, that's something but overall it's a good start, I think.
Zoeb? I mean, we were speaking about this early this year in February. I remember in London when we met at Paras's office in London.
Yeah.
Zoeb, what's your take on this? I mean, at the time we were looking at certain things, but there was also some skepticism, I guess.
I just want to make a point that I first spoke to you 17 years ago to the day. It was August 2006 when we first had our first conversation. And at that time, it was the question about whether, I think Bob Houghton was the coach at the time, and he raised the issue of trying to get Michael Chopra in. And Monday morning when the news dropped, the first thing I did was I reached out to you. I said, what is this about? Because it was one of those ones where it was the first thing I saw in the morning. And I was like, is this like Twitter, rumors? Because we've seen it so often in the last few years. People saying, "Oh, this is happening," but this is an official release. I think that just made me think, hang on, has the website been hacked or something? Has someone just posted a story up, or is this an actual concrete story? And look, first reaction is, we welcome this. We've been talking about it for years, and we welcome it. Having spoken to players over the last few years, starting with Michael Chopra, Harpal Singh, going to Danny Bhatt as well, over a decade ago, to now where you were speaking to Sean Hundal recently, I think it was yesterday in your conversation. There's a great appetite amongst these young players who want to represent India, and like Sean was saying, it does depend on what happens with the government, but I hope these are the right noises. If the AIFF are making these noises and say we were looking into this, regardless of what the kind of, we haven't really dived into who's going to be in this task force, what it's going to be made up of. There's stories about they want to get the data, and as Paras is saying, we've been tracking this data for a good 2 decades. You had a great system 20 years ago of tracking all the players across the world, and even now we've got more sophisticated ways of getting that information. That's ready. It's like, well, let's move. If this is going to happen, let's move with it. So my first reaction was surprise, but a pleasant surprise. And it was like, okay, cool. How realistic is this? And then next is, well, how serious are they? And if this is the noise that they want to get the data, then how can we be of help? I think that's kind of the key part. All the other bits you're talking about, I'm sure we'll be raising this conversation about how many players play and what you do and whatnot. But the initial headline part is, we are here and we're ready to help. Let's go with it.
We've covered, so to say, a little bit of the excitement that there is, so to say, in the diaspora in this. Rahul, you back in Bangalore, we spoke about it, I said a few days ago about it. What's the feedback that you're getting from other fans back in India? Is it as much of interest as there is in the diaspora?
So far, Nava, again, I think because we don't know much about it, there isn't way too much excitement. It's good that we are doing something about it. I mean, there is hope that we could have OCI players playing for India potentially. But again, until we have, we're sure and certain that these players will eventually end up playing for India, I don't think we should get too ahead of ourselves. I'm glad that it's happening. But again, once we have the right steps taken and once we're sure that, okay, there is some light here, I think that then you can start getting excited. But it is good news to start off with.
It's good news, certainly, but the point is it's only so far a task force. It doesn't mean that any OCI or PIO will be representing India anytime soon. Looking at something earlier today, I made public an interview with Shan Hundal, a player that Paras, you very, very closely work with, one of the boys who potentially could make a difference for India. And I had spoken to Shan earlier, and there was quite a bit of excitement amongst the players. Paras, you've dealt with other players as well of Indian origin. You deal with a number of Indian origin boys, actually, not only North America, but in Europe as well. What kind of conversations have you had or are you having with these players?
It depends on the player. I think you'll find, obviously, depending on the age, just again a bunch of factors. They'll have their own opinions, right? I think some of the players are really excited. You know, Shan is a great example. You know, I've known him for a long time. He's he's been very clear that he wants to represent India at some point if he can. Then you have other players who are younger age, who have grown up in Canada, grown up in the US, grown up in England, who either aren't fussed because of where they've grown up and what they've been given, and some who are just adamant that they don't want to play for India. So it depends on the player, and obviously I'm not going to push anybody to go either way. You know, they'll know my opinion based on my feelings. You know, obviously when we first started working, you know, in football, it was just 5+ years ago. You know, I started in Jamshedpur, and you know, I told them the story. Steve Koppel and Etal over there, the story, and you know how we were so desperate to be part and play over there. And obviously at the time, there's a little more. I think there's a lot of change. I think the I League and the ISL hadn't quite merged, or there was some other issues. So a lot of upheaval was going on in Indian football anyway at the time. So it was sort of one of those things that was probably last on the list. But I think, yeah, there are a number of players who want to play, a number of players who have made it very obvious and evident that they can contribute without stepping on toes, if you will. I mean, I guess the purest thinking that I've heard, and I think, is just the better players that play, the better that the team's going to get, and that's really the idea. It's not anyone to go there and push anybody out and push homegrown players out of the national team. It's a case of how can we go and help and bring India into a World Cup, which hasn't happened. And just based on maths, we should be able to produce a team that can at least compete. And it's changing, it's growing. I know, Rahul, I'm sure you know better than anybody on the ground there that there is change and it's improving over time. But again, even with the task force, like I'm not sure what the January deadline is. Like, why 6 months it takes to find. I'm not sure what their, again, like Rahul was saying, no idea what their approach is. And I don't know what the 6 month timeline is, to be honest with you. It's just sort of quite, as much as it's exciting, extremely frustrating, because it's like, that's great, but what does that mean? And again, back to
again, the question, Paras, I think, is also, will there be an outcome, right? I mean, you've got people excited, especially the diaspora has gotten very, very excited, but we don't know. The outcome might be also, listen, things haven't changed. Things are still the same. So sorry, guys, get an Indian passport and then call us up and we'll put you in the team. The status quo of what we have at the moment.
It's kind of crazy because we've had a lot of players who now are playing championship, Indian origin players. Again, not to name them, just in case they don't want to be named, but one that particularly is relatively prominent. We spoke with his family and a person who worked with him, and they said he should be playing for India. I was like, well, hang on, did you not know the governmental rules and the fact that people don't even know about the fact that you can't do it, So it's sort of that's even and this to this day, and we've all known this just because we've been in the game. And there are some parents or players who just really want to do it and thinking, yeah, let them get the pro contract and then play for India. But actually, wait, you can't even do that. You have to go and play in India. You have to go and relinquish your passport as to where you grew up, and it's not easy to do. I know some players. I know Shan's probably said it. I didn't, I the interview that he was happy to go, if the opportunity was right, but not everyone is there. And obviously, as the league develops, it's not a place to right now go and, to push on, because the European leagues, whether we like it or not, are still the top. Obviously, Saudi's trying to change it very quickly, with their billions. But I think, yeah, if again, there's a lot of other things that come into play. But and
we have to be honest as well, Paras, right? That the boys who've tried I remember India Ojla went to India at the time, tried at East Bengal. Surkumar Singh was the right back at the time. And Simranjit went under Stephen Constantine for a training camp with the under-17s, got a Delhi belly and literally didn't train with the team for 2 weeks. So we've had examples of why it hasn't worked. So the question is, it's a different time and age. 2023 is not 2003, 2004, 2005. Shahnawaz, you've been involved in helping players of Pakistani origin to go and play on for Pakistan, men's and women's. I think Jamal Bhuyan was also helped by you in some sort of form or way to get into the Bangladesh national team. How difficult has been that road to get those players into the respective national teams of neighbors of India, despite, of course, the citizenship issue being a different one than it is for India?
Yeah, I mean, to think my biggest recruit has been the Bangladesh captain, it tells you a story of its own. It's been challenging, but I think, like Paris mentioned, sometime it might be appealing to players, sometime it might not be. But to be honest, we haven't come across anybody who wasn't interested in this, and that can be somebody at a championship club, Zesh was at a Premier League club, and so on. Players in the Danish Super League, be it in the Norwegian top flight, anywhere, and it's always been appealing. Yes, the paperwork, yes, Pakistan allows dual nationality, but it doesn't allow dual nationality with every country. It didn't allow it with Denmark. Denmark itself didn't allow dual, so we had to wait till after 2010-11, I think it was. Norway only allowed it a couple of years ago, and that's why we missed out on people like Gaia Zaid. So the processes are standard, South Asian processes. Yes, it's got to tick these boxes, otherwise it won't move forward. And then the added red tape, like for example now a Pakistani origin kid applying a Pakistani passport for the first time is 6 to 9 month long process, even though the parents will have documents and they'll have the ID card. Of course, government involvement can expedite things. There aren't any waivers in place or for athletes or anything, but government can expedite it. But of course, when the government is out to get the federation, and the sports minister is threatening to hang the PFF chief figuratively or literally, I don't know, you're not going to get those things, done quickly. So those are the things there, but I think a lot of those things stem from similar colonial laws that we have in place. Obviously we haven't had anybody do the sort of like you said, Zumi Arata had to do it through the naturalization process, right? He had to live in India for 5 years, which was again puzzling to me. Why couldn't he just get it through descent? But he had to do it through naturalization, which is again 1926 Naturalization Act, that I think both countries have. I'm sure Bangladesh have that as well, because they just naturalized the.
See, the point with Arata was, of course, Arata came to India in his prime, right? He played in the I-League in his prime. He played for East Bengal. He played for Mahindra United. Became really one of the key players at Pune FC, and India got about 18 months out of him. Where you could have had like 4 or 5 years of a very skillful Japanese educated, football educated a player to play in your national team, and Arata is someone.
It might have propelled him to something else as well at his club front. If you'd given him just passport, through descent. So in that sense, it's been easy. It's been difficult. In terms of logistically, it's been difficult. Of course, the troubles Pakistani football has had over the last decade have just made matters worse. But we haven't had anybody in terms of outright say I'm not interested. I mean, like I said, we missed out on Gayas, we missed out on Zidane Iqbal. Zidane Iqbal obviously missed out because we were banned at that time and we weren't even an option. So that's been in terms of the girls. We've had that. It's been an interesting mix. Like the girls from UK we've had, they got both parents Pakistanis. Girls that we're looking at in the United States predominantly are of mixed background. Again, one of the girl that made debut against Singapore last month had never been to Pakistan, didn't know a word of Urdu. She was in Pakistan for about 10-12 days, and there she's belting out the national anthem. She's somebody who doesn't know a word of Urdu.
But Is this something, and again, we four sort of most probably will understand that fact, is that the connection that you have as someone in diaspora with the country of the origin of your parents or grandparents sometimes is, I feel is, I don't know if you guys think the same, sometimes a little stronger than what people think back in India or Pakistan, Bangladesh or whatever, or anywhere, I think, around the world. I sometimes feel the Turks here in Germany are more Turkish than the Turkish are themselves.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. And I think nationality and identity, it has layers, right? Today it's be like Gianni Infantino. Today I'm Qatari and today I'm Swiss. So today you're Pakistani, today you're American. So for example, the girl that played for us, she was supporting the Philippines at the World Cup. She's part Filipino, part American, part Pakistani, and same with Zidane Iqbal. You look at his interview; it's like, for me, one thing I love to be at is Pakistan versus India Cricket World Cup final. The kid plays for Iraq. He has a Pakistani passport, but he plays for
He
Iraq.
might play against India in next month in the King's Cup for
Exactly.
Iraq. So yeah, it would be interesting.
Exactly. So and that's the thing. I mean, he's still not cup tied. I mean, if we had the audacity to get to the group stage of qualifiers, we might still try to pursue him. But he gets cup tied, I guess, in November once he plays into the competitive game. But that's the thing, and I think this is where it'll be interesting how India deals with this thing, because right now, even hearing the terms OCI, PIO is like doing my head in a way. Like, no, they're just Indians based abroad, the overseas Indians. Stop, that'll be interesting how, because again, we have tabloid media calling our players, Pakistan, overseas Pakistanis, foreign Pakistanis, foreigners, imported players. So you're gonna have, again, in India, the whole reason you have one nationality is you're either Indian or you're not. That's sort of been the nationalistic approach on this. But then, how far they will be allowed to go. Of course, you can only go as far as FIFA's eligibility concerned. That's one grandparent at least. But then you've got such a huge diaspora in Southeast Asia, in the Pacific, in the Caribbean, in South America, East Africa, South Africa. Where do you draw the line? And again, Mauritius as well. And so you're going to have so much, I think, diversity in terms of your squad. If you get to that, and of course, the discourse around it will be interesting. Because again, like I said, I saw a lot of excitement, but then I also saw a lot of those usual reactions. These are not Indians. We don't need them. We don't want them. And it's like, you don't have the right to determine who's Indian. The Constitution says that you're Indian. You're Indian. That's it. So
exactly.
That for me is. So I think that's where it should be. In that sense.
And that's always, I think, the tricky part in it. Rahul, I see Shaggy has asked a question, a very interesting one. If you can pick that out. Yeah, exactly. Just to answer Shaggy's question, I think this has come independently of what Mr. Stimach and the issue with the clubs have cropped up, because otherwise the task force would have put in the informations within 2 weeks, right, to potentially activate the whole thing in the next 2 months before the World Cup qualifiers start and the Asian Cup. So I don't think it's a fallout of that. All these gentlemen know that some sort of conversations on some topic has been happening on and off within the AIFF now for the last 22 years on the topic. I remember the first time I raised it with the AIFF. Early 2001, I'd seen a documentary on Vikas Doraso on there used to be a World Soccer. There used to be a FIFA program produced by IMG Media at the time, and I saw this guy who just got transferred from Lyon, from Le Havre to Lyon, and was a French international. So that was the thing. Baichung Bhutia used to play with Harpal Singh, starting off at that time. So if we've discussed this on and off, as you said. For 17 plus years now. You've written articles about it. You know that diaspora well in the UK. Do you think that that the players would wait potentially for India to change? I mean, or would they, if they've got an opportunity to play for other countries, they would go on to play for other countries if they're, for example, mixed race kids?
if you see the example of Shahrawaz mentioned about Zidane Iqbal, who's got a Pakistani passport, he could have played if the team was able to play. If it wasn't banned, that would have been an option straight away. I think it comes down to choice and how strong you feel about it. And as far as I'm saying, with players, it depends. It's a case-by-case basis. If the option is there to play and they feel strong about it, they may wait. Or they may say, well, is an international career worth waiting for? Like you mentioned about Aruma, like how long could you wait? Do you have to go, like how many hurdles do you have to jump to get there? Is it going to be, even with what Sean was mentioning about the Pakistan passport process, how long will that take? Will it be a fast-track process? I think right now, if you get presented with a lot of choices that you feel is right for your kind of career, you'll take the best one that's available at the time. But I think by and large, it is a case by case. And some of these players have been, if you take example like Yan Danda, he's been talking about it for years. He's only 24 right now. And every so often he gets asked about it.
He
He's
spoke
been out
about
to
it.
India.
I think, didn't he talk about it the first time when he joined Liverpool and was holding an India flag in front of him?
Yeah, on the announcement.
I think that, wasn't that 9 or 10 years ago, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, whenever he was 18, so about 7 years
18,
ago.
Yeah.
No, he was younger. I think
16.
He was
16 at the time.
He signed the pro was 16, whatever what age it was. But then he talked about it. It was a big story on the website, and it was a big deal. So he's been I know he's been talking about it for a while. And I also made a trip, didn't he, to India as well? So obviously his interest is extremely public. So.
And he's been vocal recently as well on Twitter, talking about what the current situation is. He's still expressing his desire, and I think he's the one who's painted the whole situation as well. But he has to give up his passport. So,
but the point was, Rio Ferdinand, of course, was the big one. I think Rio Ferdinand supporting him, and the AIFF secretary replying to that tweet from Rio Ferdinand, which really opened that discussion a few months ago. But where do we stand? I mean, we know all these candidates. I remember Danny Bath. I think, Zoeb, you were there when we were talking to Danny at one of the Asian Football Awards about this. He's gone down there, done a documentary with his wife and other things as well. Age is catching up with him, for example. What should the players do? What should they really consider of thinking of saying, I give up my British citizenship, maybe try and get an Indian passport and try and play for India? I mean, OCI is something that most of them now have as preparations. And thanks Shahnawaz. I think we just lost Shahnawaz, but thanks Shahnawaz so far.
Zaid, do you want to go?
Go, Paris, go. You go.
No, I think it's a bit unfair actually on the players, because you're talking about players who are 16, 17, right? Likely that we're trying to get to grow. But with obviously you got your I guess you've got your tiers, right? You've got your Danny Baths, your experienced veterans, and you've got your younger players like Sean, who's 24, Jan, who's 24, and then you've got your players that some boys out in North America that are playing under 18s, under 19s, Canada, and so on and so forth. And they have this. So you have your tiered level, and depending on the player you ask, it's a very difficult thing to understand what that means, to give up your passport and then get one. Like it's not an easy thing, and it's not really fair on the players. I guess it's hard to sort of articulate sometimes and not get too emotional about it, because it's a bit unfair to put it on the players to say, right, we'll do whatever we can, when actually it should be the country to do everything they can to boost the team. I mean, France, all due respect, the French team is the players are from everywhere, and it's an amazing thing to see, because they welcome anybody who again feels French and feels part of the community, and then they give them the opportunity to go and represent the country. But
most of Europe, I think, Paris, most of Europe, even if you look at the German team, the Dutch, the Belgians, even look at nowadays Spain, Italy, on the continent, I think it's a very, very normal thing that it doesn't matter where you come from.
It is. And I think, and I understand the same thing in North America is a similar thing. With the US and Canada, if you've got Canadian blood in you, or North America, your parents are born, they'll figure it out. I'm trying to think of, and even England with like De Bruyne and all those things, they try. I think he was in England at a young age, and they try to figure out how to get him. I don't want to misquote or misspeak, but again, the normalcy is there. But again, it's all about
look at Alphonso Davies, right? Alphonso Davies, I think, is a good example. Refugee kid.
Yeah, but again, that's an example of somebody who felt welcomed and supported by the country where he lived in Canada. They gave him. He felt, and again, I'm not trying to speak on his behalf, but if I'm him, I'm sure I'm thinking, the country's given me the start, and he wants to play for Canada. That's an amazing thing. And then you have players like him who want to play for the country where they live or where they're raised. And again, so back to your question, not to get off topic, but again, putting it on the players is a little unfair, especially if they made it already public, and then to say they have to give up the passport to come play for us, which is a bit of like I don't want to say arrogant, but it's just a bit too like.
But isn't that a reality where the hands of the AIFF are tied because the government of India?
No, listen, it is. No, 100%. And again, I'm not one to tell you how to run a country with 1.3, 1.4 billion people with 300 plus languages.
Knowing you would, no, right?
Yeah,
right?
I think Zahaib and I would figure it out. But no, it's tough, but it's one of those things where, again, when I was on trial years and years ago at one of the clubs, and they went around the 12-year-olds and they all asked every single one of us, like, oh, who would you play for? You had these French kids saying play for France, or kids who've grown up or went to school in that area, and they went to me and said, oh, I'd love to play for India. And they went, you're more likely to play for us, mate. And I thought it was a compliment, thinking, oh, I'm good enough to play for England. But it's more like, no, actually, you just can't play for India. So it's a tough one, because again, the interest, like Shana was saying, you've said, Zahaib said, the interest is already there from enough players. I mean, there's 32 million in the Indian diaspora, and there's 2.5 million people emigrating every year. So it's like there's already enough players that have expressed interest. I mean, Shana has mentioned Norway. There's 2 boys in Norway that are in touch with me that play in the first division, and we talk every other few months about they want to play for India, and that's the question I get asked the most about them. Not like, can I move to another team, or tomorrow, how do I get to India? So the interest is there. I think it should be on the government as well as working with the federation to give them more of a pathway. Because then again, like you said, if the boys come and the character isn't there, then you can send them home. That's not a problem. If the girls come and they don't show the respect that don't put the heart in their sleeve for the country, and they, like you say, have Delhi belly or whatever it may be, and they don't put the effort into it, then absolutely don't have them there. But likely you'll find the opposite, where the players nowadays want to come and give everything they can because there's a chance of making history, right? And I think and then on top of that, I get back to Zahaib's point about how long do you want to wait, and then that's why I say you've got younger players who are now in line to come and join the team for the longer term, right? Rather than have your short term fixes. So I mean, it's a complicated one, but like I said, I think it has to be on the government to make it easier for players to come and play. It has to be.
Yeah. Rahul, there's another question from Sarpreet Singh regarding Sarpreet Singh from Royal Dong. Sarpreet Singh, New Zealand, now a long-term Bayern Munich player over the last 3-4 seasons, who's now joined Hansa Rostock in the second tier of German football, the Bundesliga 2. Sarpreet Singh is a full New Zealand international, so sadly, Sarpreet Singh no longer is eligible to play for India. Sarpreet Singh, I remember, also played the Intercontinental Cup for New Zealand when they played in Mumbai a few years back. So, yeah, one of those players, of course, we've missed out on.
I think he scored, right? Is it against India? Or he scored in that tournament?
He scored in that tournament. I don't think he scored against India, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, he scored against Kenya.
So and that's the interesting one. And again, to ask Shaggy has another question, Rahul, before I come to you. Triman Ranveer, I think it's a sad case of the boy. Again, the question of how good or how bad is not a question that we need to discuss, because I think no one really knows where he stands. But the boy came to India, wanting to come to India, wanting to even take up Indian citizenship, and he's now gone back after a few months. So that's for example, the example of a player proactively coming to India. No one's going to give him a slot in a team because he's a Belgian citizen. And secondly, no one was willing to help him to get an Indian passport. So it's at the moment still a catch-22, and I think that's the biggest challenge for the All India Football Federation to try and figure out is in what way can I accommodate players of origin in the Indian national team, and potentially also in the Indian club system. We had this system 2005, 2006, 2007 of when Arata came down to India, that there was this one slot in the I-League, or then National Football League, for an overseas citizen player. And we had, for example, Nicholas Nath had come over from Sweden to play over there. A few others came over as well. Again, the top of the crop. Will they want to come to India? I think things have changed now with the ISL coming around, with so much of money also being paid in the ISL. So, that was a conversation yesterday also with, day before yesterday with Sean Hundal, that Sean says, listen, I would be interested to come and play in the ISL and showcase my talent. So, Rahul, listening to us, listening to the diaspora boys, what's your take on this? I mean, we've spoken about it a few times, and you're listening now to the boys who normally speak about this topic quite regularly offline.
I think for me personally, I think I'd love to see it happen. I completely agree with what Paras said. When you bring these guys who have a lot more quality because of their football education, the fact that they've played at high levels, it's only going to get the domestic guys to do better, and your quality of football in India will improve. So not only does that improve the national team, but also improves the quality of, say, the ISL, which again all of us follow. So all in all, I think for Indian football, it's just a good thing that should it happen in the future. Yeah,
I think that's an important one. KB Holy has a couple of points on the topic. Let's get a little interactive on these ones. Again, we'll take the ones that came via Twitter as well. Rahul, if you could showcase that one. It's true that a lot of people in India think that Indian diaspora don't have the connection with India, even though there are several examples that is not always the case. It's a very, on one side, a very valid point, but my own experience is that very often the second or the third generation of the diaspora, either they are completely assimilated into the countries that they live in, or they're more Indian, or let's put, say, Punjabi or Gujarati or Bengali or Malayali than they are in their respective countries. So I think that's it's not always the same. And when we talk about sports, loyalties can change. I always take the example of Mesut Özil, world champion with Germany in 2014, and always loyal to the German shirt. He's now an Erdogan loyalist. He's supporting the Turkish president. Can you do that? Can they? I always say is, I have two hearts beating. I support Germany. I support India. When Bayern Munich played India, and even I organized the match, I was, I couldn't support a team because I support both the teams. So those are things that there are these realities, I think, which maybe people back home in India will not understand, that for the diaspora it's a different thing. And playing, again, even a Michael Chopra, a good example. Chops initially said, I want to play for England. And Chops was under-20 captain of England at an under-20 World Cup. So, and he was playing at Newcastle, he was playing at Sunderland with the opportunity potentially to play for England, which didn't happen. And towards the end of his career, he realized maybe India is a better option. And it didn't happen. Sadly, it didn't happen. Bob Houghton tried a lot to get Michael Chopra in. I think, Zoeb, you did a few stories on that as well. And in the end, he literally it gave up. But then he came and played the ISL. Wasn't that too successful? I think a little late in his career, but still he tried, right, Zoeb?
It is. And you just mentioned the ISL. When he came and he played for Kerala Blasters for 2 seasons, I thought that was going to be the opening for Indian diaspora players to come to the ISL. I thought that was the starting point. Because the next season, in the previous season, we saw Adil Nabi come over, play for Delhi Dynamos, his brother as well. I really thought that was the opportunity to start assimilating the players into India through an ISL, play with like some of the footballing legends, but also get to know the culture, get to know what football and what the kind of country is like as well. Because obviously, look, when you mentioned about diaspora, it is 50-50. Like recently, we've had the Independence Day kind of celebrations, and where I live is predominantly Indian Pakistani area. So on both days, there's been celebrations happening here, and it's both homegrown and the people come from the countries as well. So there's that massive attraction. There is affection for the nation back home. But going back to Chopra, I remember when that was the kind of big topic of conversation, and in 2007 I did an interview with Zesh Rahman, talking about his kind of experience of playing for Pakistan. And at that time, he mentioned that, well, Michael Chopra, at the time, he was the leading goal scorer in the championship in English second tier. He'd play across the age groups. He's not getting in. I can't remember who the player was they chose over him in the England team, because if he's been overlooked, he should see that as a sign that you should go and play for the country of origin, play for the country of your parents' roots rather than England, because at that time, he was saying as a realistic aspect, really. Like in terms of if you want an international career, the most realistic choice you got is go play for India. And I think he took a little while to get around to the idea of playing for India. I think there's two things with Chops was he'd very much downplay his kind of Indian roots, and also very much downplay, I want to play for Newcastle, I want to play for England, this is where I'm going to be. I think a person is allowed to develop and change over time. And I think it comes down to something that we talked to Shanawaz a lot about is, and I think Paras mentioned and he hit the nail on the head, you have to show love back as well, because there's these players who have got the talent. There's a talent pool that's available. I don't want to say the word stupid, but you'd be stupid not to tap into it. But you've got to show that you want them as much as they want to play for you. Because what will happen is, and we know about dynamics, because talent doesn't really make a team. There's already talented players in the India team already. Could they be complemented by these Indian diaspora players? Of course they can, but they have to have a happy marriage together. You can't have two camps within the camp, and that's why it's almost like, well, okay, AIFF has shown I guess you could say a positive step, but it'll be interesting to know what the players are feeling like, because suddenly, if this happens, it becomes a reality. Positions are under threat now, and is that an effect as well? Like, will it be seen as these players are going to come in and take a spot from a homegrown player, and is that a future threat down the line as well? There's a lot of questions that come up on that side.
Could I just answer that question, Zahid, quickly? I mean, like, if from the position perspective, I'd hope they'd feel threatened, and then they'd step up. Because I think, like Raz was saying, the idea is that if we can get players that come in, threaten left back, centre back, striker, whatever, and those players can go, do you know what? In true sportsman fashion, let's go. Right, let's bring it on. Because at the end of the day, it's only going to uplift the team and the squad. And again, that's where I mentioned at the beginning about coaching as well. I don't know Mr. Seamatch very well, but I'm sure, so far done a decent job. But in terms of the setup, has to be encouraging of that competition, right? I mean, we can talk about it, like Man City have 11 players for each position, and somehow they're all happy, right? Besides the fact they're getting paid $500,000 a week. But, not every player wants to sit on the bench, and, they find a way to keep everybody happy. And in the same boat, we don't need that many players. It's 23 squad for an international tournament. You can potentially get two in each position that can compete with each other, and that would be incredible, because that's what you need. And then everyone starts to see that friendly competition, and that can be fostered by the national team setup, and with the coaches, directors, whoever, and that would be. I mean, it's a good point, but I think I'd hope that you'd like to think that they'd be welcomed. I'm not saying you shouldn't be upset about your position being threatened, but use it. No,
I think yeah. Sorry, go ahead, sir.
No, so I absolutely agree with that, and I think Paris is right. It has to be throughout the whole federation. It has to that has to be the kind of mantra throughout the federation. There can't be anyone who'll be against it, because as soon as you get someone who's against any kind of forward-thinking approach, it can bring things down.
Right. But you will have people, Zoeb. I mean, Shanawaz can speak about it in the situation that there is in Pakistan, that there is a level of opposition to having diaspora players. But before I get to that, one point I wanted to add is, I think also for the Indian players is they have to ask themselves the question at some stages, do I want to stay and play ISL? I'm earning good money, but I'm losing my spot in the national team because I don't seem to be good enough. Do I then venture out? Do I go to Europe, or maybe... Why not go to Saudi Arabia? Why not go, why not go here? Why not, So the point is, all of the players will be challenged, because you will get players into the system who have been taught the proper way of football. The basics are there, right? So the question is, will then the one or the other player who is quite happy in his happy zone, so to say, Will he be challenged and thinking, okay, listen, if I want to retain my national team spot, I need to go abroad. I need to challenge myself further to improve myself. So my thinking is that the cream of Indian football in regard to national team players, they will most probably have to get better to challenge the OCIs, because otherwise you will have the situation in like the Philippines, Afghanistan has had it in the past. Look at Morocco, look at Algeria, look at Tunisia, where most of the players in a squad of 23 or 25 or 26 are born in France or Belgium or the Netherlands or in Germany or to some extent the UK. So therefore, it helps the system. And I think Indian football would get a boost out of this in a way, which I think a lot of people don't even understand that Indian football could get, because I think India is not that far away from a World Cup, from an expanded World Cup. And if we come to talk about the women's game and the players who are there, if I see, let's say, Manju Wilder is now captain at FC Cologne, under 20 world champion with Germany, those kind of players would make an immediate impact. And I think they would increase the standard and how it goes. Shanawaz.
Yeah, I think there are two ways, right? Is either the sort of Moroccan approach or the Philippine approach, right? The Philippine approach is very basic, which is like Pakistan, because Philippines doesn't have a great deal of domestic football structure. They fill the entire squad predominantly with diaspora players. They did well, and then they had hoped to capitalize that investment in domestic football, and it's still very fledgling. And there I think sort of downfall sort of came where all the diaspora players ended up playing in the Philippines and taking the Filipino passport and playing in Thailand, Malaysia. So they did the reverse, where they might have been playing lower leagues in Europe, and they got a good payday in Asia, tax-free in Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia. So that's the team sort of stagnated.
Shana, was just a small correction. Not even all of them were lower leagues. Stefan Schröck, for example, was playing Bundesliga, right? Stefan Schröck decided to leave Frankfurt and Greuther Fürth and go to the Philippines, play there, and then became a superstar in that country.
Glad you.
And he was just another player in Germany, right?
Glad you pronounced that name and not me. The team name.
Stefan Schröck, very easy.
No, his team name. I don't want to ask what the SPVG stand for.
Spielvereinigung.
So, and I think the Morocco is a very good example. I mean, look, Iran, they were top-ranked team in Asia for 2-3 years, and they still had diaspora people like Saman Ghoddos, people like, Ghoddos, and there were a couple of, they had some of these lads. Stephen Batershaw came from America, American-born, playing for the Iranian national team. What the hell? So they had some of those, I'm sure, there was Daniel Davari from Germany who was part of the team for a bit as well. And then, and I think the Morocco example is a very good one, because Morocco has arguably one of the best domestic setup in Africa, right? They win the African Champions League, Raja Casablanca, Wydad, they have probably the best infrastructure in Africa. So it's not like there's shortage of talent, but they complement it with the quality of diaspora. And that encourages, like you said, the domestic players to move out into Europe as well, right? So they do that a lot. Whereas Indian players, like I said, they've gone into that comfort zone. You're earning, 2-3 crore rupees a season. Whereas, if you get into League 2, League 1, you might get 60, 70, 80 grand a year, or regional league or third league, you might make 100,000 euros. So I think the comfort zone element is there, but it's about pushing. Who would then want to push? Who want to, the Jingan wants to fight for a place with Danny Bard, Mal Benning. I think you guys earlier touched upon some of these players wanting to look at ISL, but are not getting those opportunities as well. Like Mal Benning was free agent for 2-3 months, and he's somebody with 12 years of league experience, hundreds of caps. Like, why wouldn't? We've been there. The same with people like Netan Sansara back in the day, and and so many others. But I think there's one thing, like you guys mentioned around paperwork and the approach. It has to flow through the entire federation. It has to be long term. It can't be stopgap, right? For example, somebody, again, the option of dual nationality, yes, but like somebody said, I might be willing to give up my passport, but I'll keep my permanent residency, play for India. Yes, TMAC wants you. 4 years later, you go get somebody from Brazil or Japan or somebody from Eastern Europe, Western Europe. You might not want diaspora players. What then? Where's the surety that this thing will carry on? Again, you might also want to attract youngsters in age group teams. would the plan be for that? Because then the local will say, like, there are 1.43 billion of us. Why are we being shut out at age group level? Because if we're not getting the opportunity to develop at age group level, then there's no hope in hell for us getting into the senior team. Again, this is with Pakistan, of course. We've not had a great deal of youth structure anyway, and we've not had diaspora players in the age group. We had it once in 2007. I think that was random trial held, and after that, and I've never been like big advocate to get kids into the under 17, under 19, because I know there's no proper pathway for them. You will play the under 17, you will play this year, and then by in 2 years' time, they'll be under 19. They'll have no under 17, under 18 football in between. Well, of course, with India, you will play a lot more, but then how would you get those kids? So I think even I remember speaking to a number of Indian origin players as well, and their families, and I said, look, it's a risk. You can take up the Indian passport and rescind your European one, but you'll still have the permanent residency, right? You'll have certain rights reduced, but you'll still be as good as British, or Swedish or Danish. But then, what's the guarantee, right?
No, but there is Shanawaz. There's a good example of that. Wasim Razik, Sri Lankan, a former player at Union Berlin, or a youth product of Union Berlin, who moved to Sri Lanka and joined the national team, scored a lot of goals, joined Gokulam Kerala in the I-League, won the I-League even with Gokulam Kerala, and said, listen, my German passport is on hold. I am now a Sri Lankan citizen to represent Sri Lanka because Germany doesn't allow those as well. So we have that situation as well. So we have this whole spectrum, and we're getting a lot of questions. But Akshay, that earlier in the day, asked people via Twitter to pass on some questions, and I think, Rahul, let's get some of these Twitter questions in before we get to the questions here in the comment section. Even though some of the comment sections one is interesting as well. Just Royal Dong mentions Manpreet Sakaria, very interesting example. Sturm Graz at the moment. Someone who would have loved to have seen in an attacking position for India, because Manpreet suddenly, even though he's not been in the focus of the Austrians, suddenly the Austrians are looking at him because he's one of the best players in Austria at the moment in the Austrian Bundesliga. So Manpreet Sakaria, most probably the next one we are going to lose. Shaggy then with his comment, the next one, which says we need also overseas male, female players to come here, which means come to India. For example, Mia Bhutia with the Under-17 Women's World Cup for the United States. Made massive news. I think that was amongst the biggest news. Paras, you want to add something on that?
Yeah, so Mia Bhutia is from Pittsburgh, so she's from around the corner, and big frustration for us that we had, that she, trying to get in touch with her and work with her, and obviously from afar she's a brilliant player. But I think again, it's a good point that players need to go to India, but again, it's without being overly negative about the league, it is a zero comparison for women's football to play in America versus playing in India. In terms
no,
of
but she went with the American national team. I think same thing was. I think Shanawaz, you posted something today, right? On Desi Ballers, right? Zoeb, you posted something on Desi Ballers on Sam Kerr, I think, with a comment.
Yeah, Sam Kerr. Yeah, but Mia went and scored in the 8. He smashed in the 8-0. She scored the screamer from the 7th or 8th goal. She's captain of the under-18s. She's at Stanford now. Playing in one of the best Division 1 universities in the country, where she's going to get a ridiculous education as well as playing, and I think she wants to play in Europe. And
quintessential Desi kid, isn't it? You're at Stanford.
No, it's not. Listen, 100%. Here's the thing: she went early. She's 16, 17. I mean, she played for. I mean, she's a different case where it's like she will go to the very top. With her personality and her talent. And again, just knowing the Pittsburgh, being from Pittsburgh, knowing the work ethic here, I mean, I'm no doubt. But again, with players going,
did you have at Pittsburgh? Was it Leah Price at Pitts, or was she at Penn State?
Another girl was at Pitt. Yeah, she's not gone to Florida State. I mean, we had a few. Raj Khan was one of the first players we worked with about in 2018. He was one of Punjabi boys at Pitt.
It's a very complex one how to get to college players, because if you get to them in their final year, it's very difficult because they might have already made plans.
The NCAA is a tricky thing. I mean, NCAA has just allowed.
We've lost out on few, to be honest, because they just graduated just as our band were listed, and then they had a career plan. So we had.
Well, I mean, look, again, it's like I mean, for us, it's one of those things where we work with a lot of players who are either going to, or a lot of the players we look at are like 17, 18, or working their families, or they're leaving college. You just have to make a good case at the end of the day. How well can you sell the football career, right? Like, especially to Desi parents and Desi families. I mean, one of our players, I sat with him in the back garden with 20 family members, and it was like I'm telling them to say, "Oh, don't take a career in $150,000 a year. Go play for 25 grand and a house maybe for a year, and then hope that Paris helps you and we help you get to the million." You know what I mean? Like, it's a hard case to make, but there is you can make the case.
Yeah,
And not to digress from the topic with the college players and so on. I mean, the reason Mia is a really interesting player is because, again, if I'm Mia, and if I'm her, if I'm any player at 16, 17, already national team caps, already looking at the first team, already got a situation where she's going to get drafted into the NWSL, if she wants to, at some stage. What is the attraction to go to India? I'm not saying there isn't, but there has to be an attraction. I mean, again, in terms of playing for India, it's like, well, you've got to make it attractive for players that entire life. I mean, I think she's.
Like, if you want to poach away players from another team, yes, then you definitely got to make it interesting. It has to be either some sort of emotional angle, or in terms of a very big career opportunity. Because again, like, Morocco had to fight with Holland for Team ZH and so on. But I think you still have enough. Like, I mean, like, I've gone through hundreds of rosters in American college system, and I get warning of from there as well. Stop looking at women's squad rosters, on American college websites. But you've got plenty. I mean, but there are loads. Like, I've come across.
No, 100%. No, listen, we're agreeing.
I think the point here is if you want to, and I think the Philippines are a very, very good example. Again, in the women's game, if you look at their World Cup squad, it was actually an American college team. But again, we're digressing a little because we're going too deep. And again, we can go on. And Mia is a very, very interesting example of someone who most probably will go on to represent not only the United States. Shaggy says possible captain of the US women's national team of the future potentially, and of course there's also an assumption that Shaggy, again, currently Indian football is frog in a well, needs to step out, and I think that is something to our earlier discussion. I think that's a very, very valid point, that Indian football needs to really look at itself. I go back to something that the former FIFA president Sepp Blatter said in South Africa in 2007 in Johannesburg, doing like this, I remember, sleeping giant, and the question is, has that sleeping giant really awoken, or is that sleeping giant or the sleeping beauty still awake? Zoeb, we spoke earlier in the day. You had a very, very interesting assumption. Do you want to make that public?
This might get me in trouble, so I don't know if I want to say it. But I was just going to say, did Sepp Blatter mean it from a commercial perspective?
No.
Mean it from a footballing perspective?
Sepp Blatter meant it from a football perspective, and I think Sepp Blatter has to be thanked. Whatever else that he's done elsewhere in the world. Yeah. He's supported Indian football a lot, and it was Sepp Blatter who ensured that India got the Under-17 World Cup in 2017. Most of FIFA were or are still not interested in the Indian marketplace, because Indian sponsorship still, despite all the money that flows into cricket in the IPL, is still limited at international level. Even at the Under-17 Women's World Cup, it was not that massively supported from across India. It's a lot of governments who stepped in. So that is also a reality, that when India thinks that we have a place at the table in world football, we have to fight for that place. Because forget the Europeans, forget the North Americans, even in Asia, a lot of countries don't see us as competition. And that is something which these diaspora players, I think in a short span of time, could change. I think there could be a drastic rise in standards. And I think that's why this I find this sleeping giant narrative actually perfect in that way once, and combining it with what Shaggy said about a frog in a well, and you don't actually know what is in the outside world, is a very, very good example. And if you put those two together, that the frog really jumps out of the well and actually wakes up and realizes, what are the opportunities in the world. Saudi Arabia is a good example. I mean, I hope Dev still gets a few minutes to join us. He's at the moment at an event in Wolverhampton with the Punjabi Wolves, celebrating the diaspora in football.
Capital of British Punjab.
Yeah. Where I said to him recently that we could jump, Indian football could make a massive jump, and we need 3-4 players. Again, coming to that part of the topic at the start, we could put together a squad of OCIs, PIOs, whatever you want to call it, for the men's and the women's team tomorrow.
2 squads. I reckon you do 2 squads. Is that many? I mean,
I think
the
we've
point
all
is,
spoken about that. We can actually put a squad together, right?
Yeah.
And why not play the India team and then see what happens? Out there's the exhibition game. I think someone mentioned take the players out there to India. Why not take a squad of 18 men and women's team out to India and play against the national team as an exhibition, but also as a display of talent?
And the winning squad represents India, yeah?
Well, you got to put something on the line. Why not? Why not?
Yeah, why? No, but the point is, I think it could be a political thing. I think, again, we've spoken about this idea quite a number of times about diaspora team. Actually, if India ever comes back to the UK, actually to play a diaspora team, we have, and again, in the UK there are enough players. You could potentially activate someone like Robin Dutt, who's worked in Germany and Austria in the Bundesliga as a head coach. There are opportunities to create all of that. The question is now for the AIFF to really proactively look at the matter. So I think it's a very, very positive step that the Federation is looking at the topic. But the question is, will the task force come to the right conclusions and initiate the right steps? I think that is the whole thing. I think we could go on and talking about this topic because we are so much ingrained into this topic. We've been dealing for ages with this topic. Paris, you have a massive database yourself. I created a database in the early 2000s on IndianFootball.com, and we've been keeping it up to date. We share data about this. I think Shahnawaz knows every diaspora player in the planet. A very scary statistician on these kind of things. And the point is, what is the outcome of this task force?
But just a quick question. Do we know who's going to be on this task force? Is there any kind of noises coming out or any rumors?
They've just appointed Samit Thapa, who's of course from JCT and the Punjab Football Association president, as the head of the task force. But the AIFF in the press release also clearly stated that they will in due course announce who potentially could be part of the task force, first of all. And secondly, that date, end of January, to then present potential results to the top brass of the AIFF and to the AIFF Executive Committee to then potentially look at it and see how and when conversations can be held with the government of India. Because again, the biggest stakeholder in all of this, we can talk, the AIFF can talk, is the government of India. And the point is, you have to convince the government of India either to say, listen, guys, I go back to 2006. My then person of Indian origin card went to FIFA. It was cleared. FIFA said, yes, you prove that you're of Indian origin. You can represent India. So the whole, again...
I'm not sure if that would still be the case, though, I think. Because now...
I think the OCI is indirectly, except voting rights and holding agricultural land. Everything else you can do in India.
True. And I think that's the same with the Pakistan origin card, which people in Germany can have and people in Norway could have up until 2 years ago. But if you go to the AFC's documentation portal for registration, they categorically ask you for an ID card and a passport of that player. So, and I think that would then be looked at. But then again, you're asking the government to make a decision on a nationality matter in an election year. I think that would be tricky.
That certainly is a tricky topic. The point here is there an opportunity to create an exemption for sports? I think that's the main question, and we're talking about football. Are you ready to create something of a special exemption for players of origin, or not only origin, but for example, in tennis, a lot of Indian kids go to the United States, go to the colleges, start playing ATP, WTA, get an American passport because it's easier to travel around the world because you have to travel 20, 25, 30 weeks a year to different parts of the world. And with the US passport in most countries in the world, you don't need a visa. With an Indian passport, are you supposed to play a tournament or are you supposed to try and get a visa for the next week?
and ask for a government clearance or a sports authority clearance to go as well. So you got additional red tape with the Indian
so much.
passport.
Aaron, I wanted to bring up quick one thing before I forget.
Please.
There was a question earlier as well about sort of, was it I think someone mentioned the acceptance or what it'd be like for players of origin with respect to connection, I believe, right? Was what the question was earlier. Because I think this is a good example of if the Indian Federation want to just go for it. Is Ben Brereton Diaz? I mean, he didn't have Diaz in his name until like 2 years ago, and his name is Ben Brereton. Didn't speak Spanish, and the Chileans were like, "He's a good player. We have to have him. He's got roots." And I think that should be the approach. If this is how it's going to play, is if you have the roots and you are willing, and we'll make the case for you to come play. I mean, he was an interesting case for us just personally because we wanted to see how his whole journey went. And again, Ben Brereton was his name. I think Ben Anthony Brereton, I think is his name. And then he didn't. I think he started using Brereton Diaz maybe this year or the year before. So his whole life it hasn't been that way. And he started speaking Spanish and learning about the national anthem when he was asked by Chile. He didn't got a clue. And like I said, you had the same player in Pakistan. It's just
the girl didn't know a word of Urdu. She didn't go to Pakistan.
I think, and Ben and I guess just not to step on your player at Pakistan, but I guess Ben Brereton, just from what we heard in the States as well and in England, just from a publicity perspective, it was like, this is hilarious. Like, this guy's going to play for Chile. This is really cool, and then that just added an extra.
Look at the guy at Villa, Matty Cash. Matty Cash is
it's brilliant. I think it's just point. Like, if they want to do it.
But Matty Cash is as Polish a name as it can get, right? So I mean, think about it. That again, I forgot the player. What was the guy's name in Leicester who played for Turkey many years back? 15 years back. 15, 17 years back. Leicester City.
Sheffield. It was Colin Cousin Richards. Remember Colin Cousin?
No. Colin Cousin Richards won. There was one also in Leicester who went on to play for Turkey because his teammate at Leicester come from Germany and was playing for Turkey.
Was it this guy or something? Was it?
I forgot the name. He went on, I think, to play for Everton. But there are cross connections. I think the point here is
look at Colin Kazim Richards' example. They just put Kazim on his shirt when he got there. And again, same with Pakistan example, right? Obviously, going into second generation, Otis Khan is an example that we had. And then obviously, like now, we're just chasing a couple of players. Like there's a guy called Ole Christian Hammerfield Setter at Rosenborg. He scored 15 goals from last season for Rosenborg. Just by chance came through across the podcast and he mentioned his granddad was Pakistani, and Pakistani fans have just latched on it since. And I'm planning a trip to go to Edinburgh to watch him just tomorrow against Hearts in the Conference League. I've already made a trip to Edinburgh this week and I don't want to do it as well. But there's a goalkeeper at Spurs, a guy called Alfie Whiteman. That sounds Pakistani to you? No, but you meet the FIFA criteria. And you meet the criteria of your nationality law in Pakistan, whatever the constitution is.
You want to play, yeah.
And you want to play, and I think that's it. And there should be no other issue. But again, it's also how people understand diaspora and the sentiment. Look, Pakistan, India in cricket, 95% capacity is filled by diaspora. I was at Pakistan India game, in 2019 World Cup. It's mental. It's all diaspora. So you can see the passion, you can see the interest. And, he's been to Pakistan India games there as well. I've been to them. Again, the whole thing, like you said, it's how the diaspora is seen back home, and then how sometimes diaspora sees people back home. There's always the sort of superiority complex, like, we are here are better than them. They left us and they went. Or then the other ones like, we are here. You obviously you have your privilege speaking in terms of how you look at others. So I think it's about understanding, diaspora. But then again, international football is now just like club football. You go and get the best, however you can. People are naturalizing Brazilians, South Americans. China did that. Bangladesh have done it. Kyrgyzstan have done it. Everybody's doing it. You're doing naturalization. But if you've got access to your own talent pool, I mean, there was somebody with a proper American name the other day, I think, got naturalized by Laos. He's playing for Laos team from a kid from American college system. And I think as the world moves on, migration is a continuous thing. That's how, human nature is, human history is. We always moved. And you just got to I think embrace it. Of course, nationality laws, come in the way. But again, if Saudis could, allow nationalization, they do it in a heartbeat. But they don't allow it. But they are allowing
Bangladesh is doing it at the moment. Some of these African boys or Brazilians, considering China has done it, Japan has done it. So
Saudis are allowing it, I think, now in terms of how the local-born diaspora kids can play in the local leagues as local players. Like I said, Sahal is born in the Gulf. He could actually go back and play in the Gulf countries as a local player, and so on. And again, look at even the smallest of nations. Our friend Tom is coach of Gambia.
Yeah.
Look what he's done with him. Look, I mean, this is a guy who never lasted a year in his job. He went to Gambia. This is the longest term. They got a quarterfinal of African Cup of Nations. And they never qualified before. And look where their players are playing. So it's not a stopgap. It's about complementing, the talent. But then, once you get to the second round of Asian Cup, once you get to the final round of World Cup qualifiers, get to the World Cup, you're in uncharted territory. And you don't know what that can, do for you. I mean, just look at the Women's World Cup. And I do feel that some of these elite nations might, try to get in the way of how quickly the global South is closing the gap in terms of women's football. 150 players at the Women's World Cup had gone through the American college system. 20% of the participants. Even in the Men's World Cup, I think you had 12, 13% of the players that weren't born in the country they were representing. But I think in South Asia,
and the number is growing, right?
Absolutely, and it was up from the 2018 World Cup as well, yeah. And I think we just have this problem in South Asia where we just have this bizarre egos and superiority complex, despite being arguably the weakest region in football on the planet. And that's not because we can't play. That's just because we can't govern the sport properly. And it's the same environment, right? All those stereotypes around our physique, all those things. You take those kids in a different environment, they thrive. Look at Sam Kerr, for example, everybody they thrive. You had Vikas Dorosu, you had players play for Neil Taylor's played major tournaments with Wales. You had lads play for Norway, and so on. So it's the environment. But even like in Pakistan, we're ranked 201. And people will be commenting, oh, these diaspora players, my local district team can beat them. No, if those players are playing in your district team still, that tells you something, that they don't have to go elsewhere, that they're still playing in your district team. And I think, so it's a very, sad situation how sometimes lack of, awareness about the global game, because a lot of people still don't understand how the global game works. And I think sometimes you have to look at it and think, your ignorance is not my problem, Just because you are not that well versed in that, knowing how this global game works, that, I have to try to educate you every.
And that's part of the problem. Let's slowly get to some. Actually, I put out the point to ask us some questions on Twitter, and we got some interesting ones. Sure. Someone who calls himself Bors, whatever, and Sergio, whatever the number is behind that, as is, I was about to say Twitter profile, but now I have to say X profile, right? And the guy says, I have a lot of questions. The first one, is there a need of passing a bill in Parliament in order to amend this? What would be the detailed procedure? Now, what the detailed procedure would be, I don't know. Would there need to be an amendment passed by the Parliament? I would think yes.
Yes, I think it would need, I guess, probably the amendment to the Citizenship Act.
Exactly, Citizenship Act would be needed.
Is it 1948? What's your Citizenship Act? 1948? Was it 47? I mean, ours is 1948.
Independence, but
it's yeah, but it has been amended a few times over the decades. So there is something because it has. Yeah. So therefore, that's one. The second one, I know a lot of PIO, and this will come back to something that Shana was mentioning earlier on. I know a lot of PIO will be better than the current players. So what should be the ideal ratio? Should we allow 6 OCI in our starting 11?
I think when you go to quotas and this, that, it just ruins the whole thing. I think, Shana, when you were speaking, I think all that was coming to mind was we have to leave the football to the football people.
Yeah.
You know, and it has to be, and again, very easier said than done, non-politicized, but you have to treat, I mean, a great example of players that, you know, may not be accepted by the public, who are now, you know, doing really well. And Henderson was, I'm a Liverpool fan, so, you know, growing up with Jordan Henderson for a period of time, you know, Liverpool fans were horrible towards him in the stadiums and outside, and I'm not saying everybody, but for a period of time. And you know, a minority of people that were saying, you know, loudmouth things about him, and he became probably our most successful captain since you know, I was born. And I think that's an example of, if you're going to bring players in that may not connect culturally initially with the country and certain public, and you have to be like, you know what, they're the best players for the team. And then if unfortunately 10, 12, 15 of our boys who are already playing cannot compete, and we have a World Cup qualifier in 3 weeks, then we haven't got a choice. And it's because at this point, it's not. And I think what happens is when you go to quotas, you know, the football decision is changed to now a demographical decision. It's like, you have to keep it football based. I mean, unfortunately, if every player in France was born in not France, but they grew up in France or whatever, you know, and I know it's a different situation with us. You have to pick the best players, and that's where, you know, where I think Shannon was, I forget which one of you mentioned that. Also, maybe Arnav, you said that maybe a new coach might not want the diaspora players. I mean, a new coach is going to want the best players, and unfortunately, right now they're not going to be in India.
Coaches are weird.
So,
Coaches are
well,
weird.
they can be. We all know they can be weird.
Yeah.
But if you're charged by the government to qualify for the World Cup, and you know, I'm sure the Indian government can be pretty straightforward and say, hey, man, you better sort this out. Then I'm going to look for the best players. And if the best players are not going to be, and again, it's not to discredit what we're doing in India. They've done a lot especially since I was there in 2018. There's a lot has changed. Arnav, you know better than anybody, a lot has changed. But if the best players happen to be not born in the country, and you're bringing them in on this basis of, listen, your grandfather, your mother, your father is Indian, and you're smashing it in training, then let's go to the World Cup. And I think that's really, because that's all that matters, I think, as well, is qualifying. Because I think once that bridge is crossed, then everything else can be dealt with. Because I think that's what we're crying out for, is that, again, you know, the teasing we got as kids was like, there's a billion of you lot, how can you not play football? How can you not put 11 on the pitch? And they have a point. I mean, you know, it's purely mathematically, we have a diaspora population that's larger than Canada. 32 million people that are living abroad. Obviously, not all of them footballers, but again, you can do the math. We can do the maths, and we're unable to. You know what I mean? And I'm sure, and like Krishna was, there's a lot of them, not just, you know, Indian diaspora, Pakistani diaspora, and so on and so forth, but they can contribute. And if you do not keep it football based only, you're going to have this problem. We're going to have task force for the next 10 years. Different task force, and you know, this guy might not be good enough. Fire him, get a new task force, and then, you know, but again, it has to come down to the football, which is all we've been focusing on our end. Is like, you know, and Zahaib as well on the media side. It's just looking at, we're digging through, you know, the relationship between clubs and players and what the players are doing wrong initially. Because at the end of the day, you got to do what bring the players up to a level, and then make the complaints if they're being mistreated unfairly based on skin, culture, and so on. We can't keep complaining about that before we actually get ourselves up to a certain level as well on the diaspora front too. And that's what we've been focusing on for the last 5 years. And so now we've got to the point where, you know, there's a knowledge base. We understand what the players need to do physically and what they need to do on the pitch, and all these different tweaks and measures. And then that same approach has to be with the Indian Federation. It's like, right, let's just make it all football. Pick the best players. And if 7 of them had to be born in Wolverhampton and Birmingham, then it is what it is at this point. Because the aim of the game is to benefit.
That's a good possibility of.
Yeah, or Southall. I mean, you pick one. I mean, you know, or Toronto. I mean, Toronto. You know, we're very heavy in the Canadian market, and the Toronto market.
That's a very good point. That's a very good point. That once you have the legal matters resolved, then it's down to the coaching staff, who they want, how they want. Like the Morocco coach had to go to war with the local media and said, you know, stop this division. For me, everybody's equal. They have the best players. They're going to play for my team. And look what they achieved, right? And it's the same quote that I think we tweeted on our account recently, because our players came under attack from tabloid press, and even some of the saner voices that I thought were saner football voices, even they sort of just decided to go It's like people when they go after like jingoism and they just forget complete basics of how the game works. Even they took to social media to start bashing the players. And then I sort of came across a quote from Jack Charlton, former Ireland manager, and his point was, again, it's a quote from his book, and he said, just because these players were born abroad because their parents were forced to migrate in search of better livelihoods. If that wasn't the case, these players would have born in Ireland and would have grown up in Ireland. So just because they weren't born in Ireland, should they be denied their Irishness on the whims of some journalists? I don't think so. And I think that's the sort of...
Yeah, but again, it's where do you start? Where do you stop? I think that's the big question. And and that's the challenge, right?
I guess you do in line with what FIFA says. At least one grandparent. That's it. That's the quota point. So you can probably forget the Fijians or Malaysians that have been there for 100 years, or East Africans, they might have been there for 100 years. As long as one grandparent was born in the territory of India and meets FIFA criteria, and they can prove that documentation. But I also have a concern now is these kids, to get Indian documentation, would require their parents to acquire documents, right? Because they can't just get it themselves.
It depends, I think, how you do. I think we
the parents have to prove for an OCI card. Your parents or your grandparents need to have documentation to say that you were born on the territory of what is now the Republic of India. So that's the point. But again, it goes on and on. But again, I would at the start say you theoretically could go around the world. You could, for example, again, indirectly, very successful in the ISL, Fiji captain Roy Krishna, right? Roy Krishna now at the start, I think, wasn't good in his Hindi. Now his Hindi or his Bengali is brilliant. And he's a fan favorite wherever he is. Rahul will say, even at Bangalore, he was a fan favorite. So the point is with these kind of players, it makes sense. But again, where do you draw the line? And this brings me to the next question that Boz has. Let me try and get through the questions. Otherwise, we could go on for another 5 hours, I think. If we allow, and then his logic is, if we allow 6 OCIs in the starting 11, give them some time, can we qualify for the World Cup? That's the whole shebang question. Do X number of OCI players enable or to some extent even guarantee India the path to the FIFA World Cup?
That's a hard question, right? Like, again,
of course, it's a hard question, and there's no simple answer.
Based on paper, like if we're playing FIFA, potentially, but I think it's a case again. It comes down to, this is why I bring the coaching staff up, right? I don't know them personally, I don't know. Again, forget the staff, the administration, the infrastructure. I don't know anybody anymore, anyway, personally. And it depends on how the setup is, how the reception is to these players, right? How they're treated, what the and what the integration is, right? What what type of players they bring. I mean, the 6 OCI players, they're all defenders. I mean, what players are you bringing in on a football basis? And again, I think I can probably say, just based on seeing the quality, yes, based on pure quality. If you're going to base it on just numbers and just based on where they play. But again, I mean, PSG bought the best players in the world and haven't won the European Cup yet. So it's a case of, can you coach these players together with their cultural differences, but they all share one thing, which is the passion for playing for India, right? And cultivating that passion should sound not that difficult, based on the fact that there's a lot of pride in. I mean, God knows. I mean, me and Zahib have talked about this before. I'm sure with cricket in England. I mean, we would be on the bus at school watching the cricket games on our phones when we or on portable TVs or DVD, whatever we could find. And there's always been a pride, right? India-Pakistan semi-final in 2011. I think nobody went to school, and it was just enormous pride for our home countries, both for Pakistan and India, and it's
that's an interesting part. You guys live in a country where you care about the sport.
Correct, and we didn't. And
here in Germany, nobody cared, in the sense of those kids born in diaspora. Doesn't matter. So there is also that connection to certain sports. For example, I've been to a number of matches where India's played hockey in Germany, right? I mean,
right.
And cricket is not non-starter. So again, that's a totally different discussion. Let me try and get some more questions in before we finish, because there were quite a few questions and some interesting ones. Nilesh Mane asks, what are the chances of this happening? And did PIO players knew about this task force? Because over the past month, some of our PIOs have started following our national coach on Instagram. I think nobody knew that this was coming, this task force. So again, following national coach, not following national coach. Again, Igor Stima just raised the topic again and again. I guess that's one of the reasons why the players are following the national coach.
I think his antics against Pakistan probably one of the reasons they started following him as well.
Yeah, maybe that. Not only that, but also the ones against Lebanon after that, right? So, sorry, against Kuwait. Sorry.
The guy won a tournament without sitting on the bench for most of it. Great.
That's also a special record. So what are the chances of this happening? I think we're discussing this and you realize we're as clueless as we could be, most probably, because again, the task force has not been created. So we'll have to wait this. Roshan has an interesting question. How to avoid the integration of OCI players won't block the domestic developments. In other words, how to avoid the risk that overseas players won't become a bailout for an underwhelming local ecosystem? Good question.
I think we did bring that up though before. I think again it just comes down to again, you know, what firstly what type of football we're playing. It has to be all football related, right? What type of players you're bringing in, the quality you see, whether it's, you know, doing camps all over the world that you've identified players, bringing them to training sessions and doing a very thorough process of weeding out the players that you want to bring in, and then from there bring them to you know, India, and then having that camp and working together on the first team level, and then on the youth team level, that same process has to apply then, because if you have to apply the same process to the first team as to the youth team. So I don't think it'll be a bailout. I think you're going to see. I think there's still quality in India. There is quality in India, just purely based on maths. There's going to be quality in India. There's going to be players that are going to step up when they see that. Do you know what? We've given you guys a chance now. We're going to get some other players that are playing abroad. And you will see, I think you'll see a really quick uptick in people. You know, I'm not saying, again, from what I saw 5 years ago, I watched some of the, I think I watched the 16s, I watched the 17s, I just watched the ISL games, and the quality wasn't there at the time. And I'm sure if you brought in the threat of higher quality players that are born abroad or living abroad, then you're going to see that you hopefully, and if people don't want to do it, then those are the ones you don't want to play for the country. So if the player's not going to step up, then that's what you don't want. And I think I really don't think it'll be a bailout. I think because you're not going to get every player that's in origin to play. Firstly, I think.
Also, just a good point. I think that sometimes people feel, because you bring overseas, the domestic ecosystem going to suffer. Nobody's going to stop you from investing in infrastructure.
No,
Nobody's
sure.
going to stop you from investing in teams. Nobody's going to stop. I mean, Morocco has half of his squad from overseas. They still spend 60 odd million building their state-of-the-art training complex that everybody in Africa comes and uses, so you know they can vote for Fawzi Lecture at CAF elections. But you know, exactly, nobody will stop you from, you know, building those projects and investing in grassroots.
Exactly.
Because again, like you said, purely because of numbers, you'll just have such a big pipeline of development players.
No, for sure. I think, like I said, and I'm not saying Roshan believes this, but I think if that is the attitude from the internal voices in the government or in the federation, that attitude will not progress the game.
Oh no, you're gonna get
that. I think I know where Roshan is coming from. Roshan also. I'm just saying Roshan is based here also in Germany. So this is a little of the Germanness thinking about.
I like it.
What the problem in India could be, because Narendra Patankar is also asking in that direction. How does this affect current pipeline of homegrown players? What's the scenario in other football nations? Does FIFA rules allow such interventions? So just to answer that, it has been answered in earlier questions. Then we have Sailesh Sangrachka, someone that you guys know in the UK. He's asking that I mentioned on YouTube that previous initiatives have failed. It would be good to understand what the blockers were and why this time would be any different. Also, how can they encompass all forms of football and futsal for men and women? The blockers are simple. It was the government, you know, and it doesn't matter which color the government had. The government did not allow. The federation has gone multiple times over the last 2+ decades to to the government, to the sports ministry, to the home ministry, to the foreign ministry to try and change things. Nothing has happened. This is, in a way, not the first task force to look into the matter. So therefore, it's nothing new per se. So hopefully, again, let's see what changes are brought in, if any. But it is a first step of the new AIFF, which has been now in charge since September 2022. So therefore, let's give them some time. Let's hope that under the leadership of Samit Thapar, the right
conclusions are reached.
Yeah, right conclusions are reached. The right way of approaching players is also made, and independently of who is the national coach at the men's, the women's, that is also looked at. That this is an independent process, which I find is very, very important to try and see who's available. That it's not like it's not like India superstars in a way, and trying to find the next Baichung Bhutia, so to say, but actually look at positions, independently of positions rather. So therefore, it's a huge challenge.
I'm just waiting for the day the Indian national team coach is going to say, I need these Europe-based players for a month-long training camp.
So I think you probably said it behind the scenes, right? I'm sure I think Bob did it a while ago. I'm not sure if Stephen Constantine said it. I'm sure everyone's.
No, everyone since Stephen in 2004, every coach has said it.
Yeah.
Every let's put it this, every foreign coach has said it. So it's be it Stephen, be it Bob, Wim Kovermans, Stephen again, and then also Igor Stimac. All of them have said it. So yeah, guys, we've been speaking over 1.5 hours on this topic, and I think we could go on for days.
Till the legislation is passed.
Yeah, we could, and just to summarize, 90 minutes of talk. Let's keep it. We're in added time. Zoeb, you're smiling. Your summary of the conversation, of what you've heard, what you know, what you hope, what you don't hope.
My hope is that this isn't just talk. This is actually something concrete. But the other thing to mention is obviously the World Cup qualifiers start very soon. November, when the second qualifying round starts?
For them, yes. For us, October.
For us, well, for Pakistan, it's much earlier. I think it's October. So I think what you got to have an aim as well and a target. Like Paris was saying is, I always think that if you dangle the carrot of in 2026 is the World Cup, is that too soon for all this to happen? Yes, but if there's that energy to actually make something happen, it can happen very quickly. But it has to happen across from top to bottom.
But you know that the task force has been given till the 31st of January 2024 to present their findings.
Well, what they need to do is give you a call and fast track the data that they've been asking for. I think a couple of days ago there's a story. So the data part is done. They can ask Paris, they can ask me as well. So that bit's done. You say, all right, cool. What's your checklist? And let's tick them all off. Get to the point where you can present this in 1 month. Let's over deliver on this and deliver it much quicker than the end of January. I think that has to be the emphasis now. We let's move quick. We've been talking about it for 17 years, and all of a sudden, if there's a different opportunity, then we're not going to be like, oh, let's then wait and see what happens. This is the opportunity, so why not? If that door's a little bit open, let's go in.
Shanawaz?
I mean, he's expecting unrealistic things from South Asian machinery bureaucracy. Good luck with that. But no, I think South Asia, in its entirety, need to embrace it. Because even in Pakistan, like I said, we've never really had our full strengths to test in good circumstances. We've always had, especially with the last decade, we just are in turmoil and so much upheaval that it just hasn't worked out. So people do turn against it, but there are successful examples. But there's better environment around that, how those things get there. But I think obviously if India does it and it does well, that then sort of reinforces Pakistan's point as well. And same with Bangladesh. Again, Bangladesh are sort of doing well with the diaspora. They just won the Asian Indoor Athletic Championship, 60-meter sprint. We would have given Bangladesh a chance in that. And it's a lad from Z's End in London who's gone over and won the Asian Indoor 60-meter championship. So it shows that things can be done. But like I said, they've been given till January to come up with it. Of course, we still don't know the sort of people that will be part of this task force, because there could be people in this task force that are pro this and anti this move as well. You'll have those kind of voices, I'm sure. And then, of course, like I said, an election year challenges as well in terms of policy-wise. So, but it's good to see the sort of dialogue sort of starting from the federation's point of view. And I think then you can only take it, forward. Of course, I remember Shahji's tweet when Danda tweeted, and he sort of categorically told him, this is the process, and obviously, you're bound by that. There's nothing you can do about it at that time, unless again, it's for those players who have relinquished their citizenship, take up Indian. You're more than welcome to do that tomorrow.
Paras?
Summarize. I mean, it's a good start.
What's your hope? What's your hope? I mean, when you hear our discussion, and again, it gives a whole reality check of what has happened over the last 2+ decades, or rather, not has happened over the last 2 decades. Again, the conversations we've been having, or we physically had in London, if you'll remember, and Zoe was there as well, where we talked, what can happen, what can be done. We've now seen, what Pakistan has done over the last few weeks and months on the women's and on the men's side. We see Bangladesh, we see Sri Lanka, Nepal potentially now looking at diaspora players as well. From an Indian perspective, what would your hope be as someone who lives in diaspora? I mean, you're based in North America, you're British born, so you combine, so to say, this whole package of where players potentially in the first step could come from.
Yeah, and obviously grew up in England, right? So I spent 17, 18 years of my life, in the first 18 years of my life in England. So
that's why I said.
No, I know.
US.
I appreciate it, because I think there are differences in diaspora, right, with the attitudes and the cultural differences in the UK and US. But in terms of hope, I think it's just make it easier. Like, I don't understand the task force concept. It's like, all right, I think if you've got, look, I'm not going to call out any individuals we've dealt with in the past, but if there are certain individuals you trust to do a job, I guess we're here, as we've all openly put the flag up and said, look, we've done the work for you. We're already working in football, whether it's in everything from Premier League to 6th Division or North America on our end, and the CPL, and I mean we've had relationships everywhere, and yourself and Shanawaz and Zay. I mean, between us four, and I'm sure Rahul as well, like, it gets everybody. But I think the hope is just to make it easier for people that want to represent the country to do it. I mean, it just means if it means the OCI then qualifies as a domestic, almost like an O1 visa in the States, which is a special person, a special talent or special service. Granting that, which I'm sure will make it easier than amending an entire part of a constitution. I think the hope is that by 2026 that we got close. That's the hope, I think. And the hope is, I think that, obviously being a friend of Shan's and working with Shan closely and in many bases, seeing him score a couple of goals, in Bombay in next year. I mean, I don't think it should be that hard to implement. If done correctly. No, but no, listen, we all know the bureaucracy. We all know. But I think it's just a case of, like, we've seen like countries that are obviously a lot smaller, that have smaller populations, that are able to, Iceland, they're just like, we're just going to build domes. There's 240,000 people, whatever it is. We're going to build domes so we can play in the dark. And they beat England in the Euros. I mean, it's just, these things can be done. It's just a case of who's going to do it. When the task force is going to be announced. I mean, they announced the task force, but didn't announce who's going to be in it. They've announced like a deadline of presenting. I actually don't know. This is what's frustrating, I think, where I get, and I'm sure Zahib's sick of me, because every time I'm sure we all talk together on the phone, I'm driving, and 4 hours later, I'm just complaining. But I think the frustrating part is that there's no clear target. It's like, what's the goal of the task force? Is it a PowerPoint? Because that can be done in about 3.5 hours, right? This is the players, this is where they're all based, and this is why we need them. We haven't qualified for the World Cup. That should be it. We haven't qualified for the World Cup. That should be the biggest signal to say, right, this should be a no-brainer. Because if it doesn't work, then you don't have to. Then if it doesn't work and the players somehow aren't good enough for whatever reason, or they, whatever the reason is may be, then you can call it off and stop spending the money on it. But I feel like there's enough. There has been enough chatter, enough desire from players like ourselves who grew up in North America, grew up in England or Europe and so on, that want to play. So yeah, the hope is that you see a couple of these players playing in some qualifiers next year, because I think it's very doable. If, again, I don't know the constitutional legal setup, but if they wanted to do it, they would have done it by now. Is sort of where I'm coming from, and I think that hopefully we get the outcome, which is whatever PowerPoint presentation they deliver in 17 months or whatever it is in January 1st, that says these are the players, these are the people we've spoken to, whether it's ourselves, whether it's us on the podcast, if it's other individuals that are like us in other parts of the world that have the data. I mean, I'm not sure if they do have as comprehensive as data as I'm sure we have combined, which is really great. But we've been saying this to everybody involved, that we're already here. We've done the work. We're happy. We've done the work. So just go put together the PowerPoint or whatever it is of the players and get them in a training camp, and then let's go. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Or bring the Indian national team to the States and train them here, or do it in UK and do it in Scotland, do it in Germany. But again, these are just that's, I guess, again, sorry for the long conclusion, but yeah, that's the hope, really.
Arun, before we go, just a quick one. What would your recruitment cutoff sort of standard be in terms of the leagues in Europe? Obviously you're ranked 100 or 99, 98. Like, we can go to a conference and we'll say, look, that guy's good enough for Pakistan or League 2. What would your be? And the second question, what about those kids with Pakistani parents and Indian parents? We've got some dilemmas with that.
We start off with in the past, Zesh Rahman could have played for both countries.
Yeah, let's not go there.
But that's a practical example. Yeah. And I'll tell you, I think India will not touch any kid where the lineage is not clear to the authorities. So if there is anything which is linked to Pakistan or to a Bangladesh, I don't see a chance for someone, be it a Punjabi or Bengali, whatever, to play for India.
Reality, though, it's a modern reality now that there are within families or relatives and friends, you got people that are with one Pakistani parent, one Indian parent, could be of same face, of course, or different, but of course, the Indian parent side doesn't have an Indian passport either. So I guess that, in terms of Pakistani context, that's a bit of an advantage. But on the other side, it could be. I mean, it'll be a challenging thing even if we try to.
It's a difficult one, because if you're going back to grandparents' era, for example, my grandparents on both sides, fathers and mother's side, were all born in what is now Bangladesh, but left Bangladesh before Bangladesh or East Pakistan was created at the time, right? They left in the 30s and 40s. Now, if someone like that comes around and says, listen, I want to represent India, I think it could be difficult. And I think it not only difficult, I think it'll be impossible. So therefore, these kind of questions are very tough. I think, and I think you have to look at it on a case-to-case basis. I think you shouldn't generalize. And the same is what I would say regarding players of what division or what league they play. Because I jokingly tell people that I feel my hometown team, FC Remscheid, who plays 6th division, that some of our boys most probably are better than the boys playing in the national team, because they're all players who played under 17, under 19 Bundesliga, right? So the basics are good. So therefore, I think there shouldn't be a cutoff. I think it should be, the Indian national team needs to be sort of an open forum where players show themselves. It's not just a question of football. It's a question of, can you adapt? I think that's the biggest challenge that these players will have. And that's the question of, there will be players who will have problems. And we've seen that in the context of the Indian Super League. Lovely example, I think, is Florentin Pogba, who's come over. And Florentin Pogba is a brilliant footballer. I mean, again, he's a Pogba, but that's a different question. So there's the style factor to it. He has failed at ATK Mohun Bagan and at the Mohun Bagan Super Giants so far. And if you ask people in France, they'll say, hey, he's an established Ligue 1 player. But he's failed in India. So I think at the start there are 4 or 5 players that what India should look at. You should try it out, see how it goes. Then cast your net wider and see who's available, not only on the men's side, but also on the women's side, because I think especially 2027 Women's World Cup, 2026 AFC Women's Asian Cup, those need to be the targets. I think if I see a Vietnam and a Philippines just playing in this World Cup in Australia and New Zealand, it pains me to not see India in that competition. And we could have made it even without the diaspora. We're that close. You see so many of our girls now moving into Europe as well. So the women are much, much closer than the men's. But again, if you get those 4 or 5 diaspora players in, I think India would be a sure bet to qualify for a Women's World Cup.
But I think also, sorry, Shanaz, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, even on the women's side, I think the AFC has a problem. The Women's Asia Cup is only 12 teams. It should be more. And I think, if you make it to 16, you'll have a few more teams, especially with the standard improving. I mean, if you can move the men's tournament to 24 teams, surely you can, expand the women's tournament by about, 14, because the standard's clearly improving. And of course, and I think, India should definitely have a crack at it. You're ranked higher than, let's say, Morocco. So, and of course, we know what happened and how Philippines got there and how India sort of, self-sabotage those that tournament back in 21.
January 22, yeah.
Yeah, so it's been, challenging. But again, I think it just sort of, the comment, just one last thing, I saw the interview with Alan Sturridge, the Philippine manager, who just gone back to Australia, and he said something on an interview. He said, with this Philippine squad in the 18 months, we were about 40 years behind the rest of the world. And he goes, in those 18 months, we've probably done a 35 years worth of catching up. Well, it just shows you in terms of how much ground you can make. But of course, now the ball is in like Philippines court. Do they sort of, stagnate like the men's did, or do they build on it? Of course, that's a different. But again, like just how big our diaspora is, we don't have enough players. Philippines got 400 players on their books just in America alone. 400. I can't find 10 out of 1,000 Division 1 to 3 colleges.
But those are realities, right? So, yeah, it's really interesting to see how the AIFF handled this whole matter. Again, the task force has been created. It has given itself a timeline of nearly 6 months to deliver something. Interesting to see who will be part of that task force. As has been mentioned by different people, the database is ready. It could be given in 1 minute. So there needs to be no research on that topic, actually.
They need to ask nicely.
Yeah, that's one basic point. Yeah, but and then of course pick and choose, and then it is left to the technical people in the federation as well as the national coach if they're in that position, or is that database something that they will go to the government and try to see? And Shanawaz, you mentioned it earlier. One should not forget 2024 is an election year in India. So the question is this topic going to be addressed at all? So that's there are a few stumbling blocks still left, but it's a good positive start. Yeah.
Going by recent developments, it might just take an Igos too much tweet to solve it.
Who knows?
No, but you never know. There's other countries have used sport in the past to bring people together, so you never know. It could be if someone is smart about it, they could use it really, really positively, and that could impact sort of the speed of this task force that's going to go into place. But no, I think it'll be all right. I think we're getting somewhere.
Excellent, Rahul. Your takeaway from this diaspora discussion?
I think simply from an Indian perspective, in terms of integrating these players into the system, I don't think there should be much of a problem, because from a fan's perspective, a football fan's perspective, all you want to see is success at the end of the day. I support Bengaluru FC, I support Arsenal, regardless of how many homegrown players or local boys they have. At the end of the day, you want to see them succeed and you want to see them win championships, leagues, etc. And it's the same with the Indian team. You want to see the Indian team qualify for the World Cup, do well in Asian competitions, and regardless of the players or where they come from or things like that, you just want to see them succeed. So yeah, I think that part of it should not be a problem, and just hoping to see this come through in the end.
Exactly, come through in the end. Those are the perfect words. Gentlemen, as always, thank you very much for taking your time. 1 hour and 50 minutes. So we've played a new league system with 20 minutes of added time. Rahul, as always, thank you for joining as well and co-hosting. We will be following up on this topic, and I think we might be getting a little bit more concrete on it. Those of you who haven't seen it, Shan Hundal, done an interview with the boy. Very, very interesting, very, very insightful. And we'll bring you more interviews with other players, with ex-players who've experienced this topic, and we'll keep you updated. Thanks a lot, gentlemen. And as always, like, share, and subscribe. Not only Sports Khabri and Aaron Foot. Zoeb happens to be the Desi baller in the UK. That's you'll find him on Twitter and on Instagram. Parus can also be found. Shanawaz is a little bit more difficult to find. He's a little bit anonymous sometimes, but someone who's very well informed. So, gentlemen, once more, thanks a lot. And as always, keep following Candid Football Conversations.